Cachamaniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome to episode 239 of the GeoGearHeads, our 48th randomized show. I'm Daryl W4, covering from a fiber cut, back with my co-host as usual, the Bad Cop.
It's good to be back in my old studio. I would like to say aloha to all of our listening audience this evening. Yes, I'm still in the Hawaii frame of mind, even though I am back on the mainland.
Well, if you really want to, you can just say aloha. We won't stop you.
Aloha and mahalo. It's like they have a different word for everything there.
They kind of do, but, it's kind of a different state of mind down there, too.
Oh, very different. I liked it. Let me tell you.
Well, I was very jealous.
Nice. But this is one of my favorite episodes is the Randomize episode, Daryl. I'm really glad to be back in my studio, see the good lighting. I don't have a reflection of the sunset in front of me, however, but, we do what we have to do.
And you have the advantage of the better monitors so that you can actually see all the stories that we're talking about today, including reading lots of feedback.
Because I hear there's a lot of feedback. In fact, let's start with a little feedback, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
And we're not talking noise. We're talking email. This one came to us from Cedar and Company. It's a great name. I mean, it sounds like a restaurant, a high-end restaurant. I'm going to Cedar and Company. You want to join me there for mojitos, perhaps? Anyway, they start off and say, "Good day, GeoGearHeads. I'm gradually catching up on the podcast as life permits. And even though I've missed the live tip show, I thought I'd send in a couple of tips just because." And thank you, Cedar and Company. We always appreciate that. He continues. It says, "My first tip is related to puzzles. Once I've solved a puzzle, we update the coordinates on the cache page and then bookmark that page in a list called Solved. We also create a normal pocket query from that list." I like that. The benefit of that is when we open up the geocaching map, select the pocket query tab and pick the solved query, the map shows us only our solved puzzles, and it shows them at the updated coordinates. This makes it very easy to see what's solved in a particular area and to see where the final is located in that area. The other tip is getting all the caches in an area without overlapping queries. We were traveling to Ottawa, Canada a few months back, and I knew from experience that Ottawa has many thousand caches in it that are a pain to try to separate with my usual pocket queries. So I took a page out of Project-GC's playbook. I picked the cache to act as a center point, then created a series of queries based on date published. Each query was centered on my chosen cache and had the same parameters: radius, not found by me, active, etc. And the dates were tuned to return just under 1,000 caches. It was a bit fiddly to get the dates to work out, but not overly so. It took about an hour to figure it all out. It helps that as long as you don't actually specify a run date for the query, you can tweak it and submit it as many times as you want. For example, I ran query 1 from May 1st to June 30th, May 1st, 2000 to June 30th, 2008, with 922 caches on the list. Query 2 was from July 1st, 2008 to March 1st, 2010 with 899 caches, and so on. I picked month beginnings and ends for simplicity. The result was 8,248 caches in 9 queries with a radius of 100 kilometers. That's 60 miles if you're south of the border, and no overlap. If you want to update the search, I really just have to add one small query with the most recent dates, and all the older ones will be essentially unchanged, except for the gradual archiving of those caches. Well, there you have it. One of these days, I'll try to get on and listen to the live version of the show and not just to the podcast a few weeks later.
Yeah,
well,
he was
I don't think
talking
there's any
about
problem listening to the podcasts a few weeks later.
No, it's just you have the lag time, like he's talking about where he missed the live show for the tips. But talking about that first one with the bookmarks, that's pretty much the same thing I do. And Limax in the live Q&A is saying that's exactly what he does too. Corrected chords, bookmarks, and pocket queries. I just actually stopped doing the pocket queries because I just don't even really need them. The apps allow you to download it as a list. And when you do the caches in the regular pocket query, they come through with the corrected chords anyway.
Mm-hmm. So it's a great idea. And if you're not doing it that way, he laid it out very well to follow those steps. So thank you, Cedar and Company. We appreciate that. And I hope our listeners maybe picked up a tip off of that.
Hopefully. Now, we can't let a randomized show go by since it's the first after the launch of Pokemon Go and not talk about Pokemon Go. We're not going to talk about it too much. Oh, yes, you have. But we're not going to talk about it too much since, it's kind of all over the place right now. Lots and lots of news, lots and lots of talk. But there are a few good stories that we found, including the launch in Canada. Had a launch event in Toronto that had almost 4,000 people show up for it. And this is, the launch event, which, wasn't an official event, just a bunch of people getting together. An article that talks about the robbers who used Pokemon Go to lure their victims using lures. One I'm sure most people have heard about. And the culprit was actually caught, and I think preliminary sentencing has already been completed. So it's like, wow, quick justice. Gizmodo had an article about the reported major accident in Massachusetts, which was a complete fabrication. So that was a good one. And
however, do not be looking at your smartphone while you're driving.
No. Yeah, but there's been a lot of false stories. Mm-hmm. So, you really got to double check all this stuff and triple check to, make sure it's right. Because when I heard that story, it seemed plausible, but not likely. And sure enough, it was a total fabrication. And it turns out, last I looked at least, they couldn't even figure out where the origin had come. So, yeah. And then there was another story about police mistakenly identifying 3 Pokemon Go players as drug dealers.
Did you hear about the man who shot at 3 Pokemon Go players in their car? Now, they were parked in his driveway, and he thought they were there to rob him.
Yeah, so I heard about that.
He came out and shot at the car, hurt the bumper of the car, didn't hurt anybody, but they were playing Pokemon Go in his driveway.
Yeah, which is something else, be respectful. Same thing with geocaching, be respectful of private property. And then there's a few articles out there with help, but there's a couple in particular that I thought we should point to. One is the security risks and how to play more securely. Another one is actually kind of cool. It's a parent's guide to what you need to know if you've got little ones or not so little ones playing the game.
I see kids everywhere playing this game. So, if you're a parent and you don't understand it, you need to, at least take a look at these. They're going to be in the show notes, right?
Yeah, we're going to put these in the show notes. We're not really going to talk about this too much right now, but we'll leave it in the show notes. So if you're interested, go over, check them out. They're cool stories that hopefully will give you some help and some entertainment.
It amazes me, and I'm not going to stress on this, but the fact that several days ago, I don't know when my son read this to me, that over 23 million people had downloaded this game.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's bigger than any of the social medias.
Yes, well, except for Facebook.
As far as mobile downloads.
Yeah, no, Facebook I think is still higher.
You think? I thought it surpassed Facebook in mobile downloads.
Not last I heard, and last I heard was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, so it might have changed. But the more interesting stat that I heard was actually measuring the network usage, and Pokemon Go in some early tests out of the UK, if I remember, was taking
Mm-hmm.
less than a 16th of the network bandwidth used by Facebook.
Interesting.
Facebook is a very, very noisy, data-heavy app. And
Well, you know, it's recording your voice and sending all that data back to servers.
Oh, it records all kinds. It's sending your contacts, your SMSs, all kinds of stuff gets sent back that you don't necessarily know. But a number of the more tech-savvy people I know use nothing but the web to do the Facebook stuff because of all of the extra information that gets sucked up and sent to Facebook. And, you know, it's just much better performing if all you're doing is, you know, checking in on stuff and making the occasional post. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Your relatives.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't have the downloads of the app, but the number of US, UK, or not US, US, Australian, and New Zealand users in that first weekend surpassed the largest global mobile game ever, which was Candy Crush, which peaked at about 10 million users. And in the first weekend, Pokemon Go had 12 million active users. So that's certainly going to taper off, but it's impressive. And we're seeing a lot of commerce happening over it. You know, people buying the Pokemon toys, a lot of places doing promos. I've got a yogurt shop, frozen yogurt shop over here, where if you put a lure on the a Pokestop right outside of their shop, which you can get to, of course, from inside the shop, you get 10% discount on your order.
Interesting. I passed a Subway. My son took a picture of it. 5% off for Pokemon Go players. So.
Yeah, and one of the more interesting ones was a sign in, I think it was a Boston pizza shop's window. If you're level such and such, you get a free drink. Another level gets a free slice. If you're like level 30, you got a free large pizza. Wow. So it was a promo to get people in. And other ones were doing all kinds of similar kind of, discounts and giveaways, free drink with your meal, that kind of stuff. The more interesting and common thing has been places that are buying lures and putting them on during business hours so that it's always there. And I want to say it was a coffee shop that said they quadrupled their business in the first couple of days. And by the end of the week, they had over 10 times their usual sales.
No way.
And it's, they spent $160 over like 2 weeks. And
advertising.
Yeah, it's cheap. Well, and part of the thing that I keep hearing is you do have to have a fairly good social media presence as the business to make those lures actually pan out. And same thing with some of those discounts. Unless you have a lot of foot traffic where you can just put up big signs in the window, you need to have that social media. And the Pokemon Go players tend to be big on social media.
Right. Oh, it's an interesting phenomenon that we've seen. And, as geolocation gamers, we can't ignore it. Now we're not going to dedicate this entire episode to it, but it's a big enough draw that we have to talk about it.
Yeah, and there's enough that's going to be changing, including the sponsored, if anyone hasn't heard, there's sponsored Pokestops in Japan. If I remember correctly, and so hopefully someone can correct me if I didn't, every McDonald's in Japan, and there's not as many McDonald's, of course, as there are here in the U.S., has a sponsored Pokestop at it. So you get your burgers, fries, and a Pokestop.
There you go. It's a one-stop shopping.
Yep. Well, and the interesting thing was I got an email today from GameStop, and if you go in Monday, which is August 1st, they're going to have some kind of special card to allow you to redeem a special Pokemon.
Now, my son plays the other Pokemon games.
I don't.
And if he takes his Nintendo DS, whatever flavor he has now, often to the GameStop about once a month, you can get a special Pokemon by connecting to their Wi-Fi and doing that. So it doesn't surprise me, but I don't know how that will work in this particular Pokemon game.
Yeah, this is Arceus, Arceus. So it says come into your local GameStop and pick up your very own Arceus plush and digital distribution card.
Sounds like it's a purchase.
It sounds like it, yeah. Although it might be a little bit of both. You might get something for free, and you might get the Pokemon plush for a while.
Max says, I take my 3DS to the GameStop as well, but only for Street Pass.
I was just going to say, I was just going to read that. But yeah, I'm not even sure what the Street Pass was. I had a 3DS and got annoyed with it and, traded it back in.
Yeah, I think my son has the 2DS. So it's not 3D, which is kind of annoying. But anyway, that's another topic. I'd be surprised if there was a link with the other games, but there could be.
Well, it actually said Pokemon Go in the email, so okay. I think they do have something set up. And it's not as if Pokemon Company isn't involved. Niantic is the project lead and everything, but
it is the majority of the money. Did you hear about the stocks lately?
Yeah. Well, the problem is Nintendo. In the reports actually vary, but apparently Nintendo doesn't even own a third of the Pokemon Company.
Oh really?
Yeah, it's that low.
The company. I thought I heard something like 18% of Pokemon Go is what they're getting of the profits off of that.
It could be 18%. I don't know, but of the Pokemon Go company, Nintendo only owns somewhere. I think it was 32.5 was the best estimate that was thrown out there. But wow. It's one of those that it's kind of a secret or something. I don't really understand how it is that a publicly traded company can own part of another company and not have that information be public.
It's Japanese.
Yeah, I don't understand Japanese law at all.
We don't have to.
No.
But one thing we can understand is a little more about the European Space Agency. Do you see how I did that?
I did.
Yeah. So Astronaut sent us an email saying, Space News, seen sat-nav for the trees. The European Space Agency turned to the academic world to sharpen its understanding of how woodland vegetation can negatively affect the performance of the satellite navigation systems. Its leading cause to sat-nav signal multipath, meaning the signal bounces off surrounding surfaces like echoes on their way to the receiver, which the receiver still picks up and processes as if they were coming directly from the satellite. So that's interesting.
Yeah, reading this article, and there wasn't a whole lot of information, and thank you again, Astronaut, for sending it in. But I wanted to get like the full report, and I didn't see that in the links or anything to this or from the story. But it sounds a lot like what we've been seeing with the urban canyon issues, where you get the signals bouncing around. So apparently, the same thing happens going through trees.
It makes sense. I mean, you get into a heavily wooded area and, your GPS just isn't as accurate. But that would make a lot of sense because it's getting, the multiple signals bounced off as an echo and it's throwing off its exact location.
Yeah. And one of the theories that people had been throwing around early on, pretty much as long as I can remember, is that the leaves diffuse the signal and make it harder to get a good fix. So, it's not too different, but no, I'm curious to see what it actually is.
Yeah, anything with water in it or a liquid is not good for any sort of radio signal.
No, and unfortunately, the signals that they're using for GPS are not really good frequencies for much of anything.
We need higher tree-piercing frequencies.
And building.
Yes,
but that's not the...
What Let's change the way the buildings are constructed to be more GPS signal friendly.
There's been talk about that.
Structures and such.
There's been some talk about that. Team Maviju, though, emailed with another issue, and he said maybe this is something for your next Randomize show. This article shows an interesting problem geocachers will have in the coming years from the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. This article talks about Australia moves north at 7 centimeters per year, and the Pacific Plate moves at 11 centimeters per year. So over 10 years, that's 70 centimeters or 1.1 meter. Wow. I'm going to add the GPS correction factor to GeoCube, which I'm assuming is the geocaching app he wrote, so that this can be taken into account.
Interesting.
Well, and I've heard a number of times after earthquakes that maps have had to be corrected for movement, and caches in Japan and
Yes.
Chile had to be moved after their earthquakes. So I'm not surprised in the slightest to hear this, but I love hearing that this one is that predictable.
Exactly. You know, you think, well, if we wait long enough, Australia will come to us. We don't have to go visit it.
I don't have that much time.
We can drive to it.
Well, here's the question. Is it going to be cheaper to just cryogenically freeze yourself and with the instructions to thaw you out when the Australian continent hits North America?
India?
Or, yeah. Well, it's going to take a long time for that to happen, isn't it? Or would it be cheaper to just fly there? I think the latter.
North. It's moving north, so it's going to hit Asia first.
Yeah.
If our maps are correct. I don't know if I trust them.
Well, and if I remember, I wouldn't trust it. If I remember, all of the continents are slowly moving as the Earth moves around. So
right.
I don't remember in which direction. Right. So
they're all moving away from each other. So in relativity, shouldn't they just stay there?
No, because the Earth is round. It's going to go and slam into each other at the other side. So if global warming doesn't kill us, the shift in the plates are going to kill us, I guess.
Continental drift will.
Yeah, there you go. Another article that I found was on iMore, and it's the best iPhone bike mounts. So this was something that anyone who has the phone and wants to go on the bike trails or whatever, go commuting to work, is probably going to want to check out.
Go.
Well, Pokemon Go, I always use it for cycling and, using it as my bike computer. So
you need to hatch those eggs.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're done with Pokemon Go. Continue.
Yeah, except I go a little too quickly usually on my bike, and it wouldn't count it as walking. But there's a few different mounts in here and a few different price ranges. So again, we're just going to leave that in there. And if anyone wants to check it out, it gives you some good iPhone bike mounts. Some of them were actually probably suitable to other devices, but my preference for the bike mounts is you really want something that's fitted, and that gives you the best protection for your phone.
Yeah, that's true. Now, this did come from iMore, which is a Apple specific website.
Correct.
So
correct. And
that's the reason that your iPhone.
Right. And Limax in the live Q&A says you need 2 mounts, one for the iPhone and one for the GPS. Why, yes, I do.
Well, obviously. And then a third for the next one, where Engadget talks about the yet best USB battery packs. You got to be able to charge everything.
Yeah, definitely. It's rough business playing Pokemon Go, as many people have found out. And we've gotten some emails that we'll talk about next week, where GPS users and smartphone users talking about how they haven't had the best of luck keeping their iPhones working in GPS situations, in geocaching situations. So yeah, I do tend to use battery case when I go out in the field. Mm-hmm. But a lot of that is really about the way that you're using it. So, people have been complaining their iPhones don't even last 4 hours of caching. I've done 6 to 8 hours of caching without charging, right. But it really does take some stretching to get it that long. So that's what next week's show is going to be. So make sure to check that out.
There you go.
But the cool thing is this Engadget article went and actually tried out a bunch of these batteries, and they came up with some good recommendations. If you want something that's actually a pocketable unit, they recommended the travel card charger. And of course, we'll have the link to the article in the show notes so you can check it all out. For the unit to leave in your bag, they have a 6,000 milliamp hour battery. If you need something to charge your phone repeatedly, they say grab a 16,000 milliamp hour battery from Amazon Basics. And I have to say that those Amazon Basics products that I've been picking up are remarkably good, and they're really, really cheap. And then if you want something that will charge a bag full of devices for a full day, or, one Nexus 5X for about 4 hours, get the RAV Power 2600 milliamp hour portable charger.
No, 26,800.
26. Yes. Sorry. Thank you. Good correction.
Okay. I feel bad, Daryl. I said I wasn't going to talk about this the entire show.
Uh-oh.
My son has my older iPhone 5, right? Before I gave it to him, I replaced the screen and replaced the battery. And it's been a great unit. But now that he's playing Pokemon Go all the time, it doesn't stay charged like it should. So he has my 8,000 milliamp hour battery, keeps it in a pocket, and takes the cord up, and that's working great for him. I also have a 20,000 milliamp hour battery that I call my weekend battery. It's going to charge my phone and my iPad, throughout maybe a 3-day weekend, and keep me going. And that's all I need to take for most weekends away. I don't even take a plug-in charger. So there you go. Again, bringing it back to Pokemon Go. But we could actually say, a lot of this was because of Ingress.
Yeah. Well, and I use a lot of this stuff before Ingress just for charging my phone and playing or going out caching. One of my favorite batteries is not nearly what it used to be, but it's a Hyperjuice battery that actually has the charger built in. So the prongs come out the bottom of the battery, and you plug it into the wall, and it's got the 2 jacks. I want to say it was like 16,000 milliamp hour battery. That's good 6 years old probably. But I'd take that to the hotel, plug it in, use it as the charger, charge that up, and then use that in the car or whatever for the people in the back seat who didn't have enough power. Right. Even just carrying it in the bag when I went out ingressing later, because that had a ton of horsepower, and it was one of the few batteries at the time which would actually work with a iPad. Because the iPad takes that 2.1 amps, and at the time, most phones only charged off of 500 milliamps, so quarter the power for most phones that you needed for the iPad.
Exactly. But, having a good battery pack with you for whatever reason is a wonderful thing. If it's not for you, it could be for your caching friends or your other geolocation gaming friends. So have a USB battery with you for whatever reason. And
one of the best ways to make friends when you're on an Ingress run or on Pokemon runs is to have that battery handy. Going back to the commerce end of the Pokemon phenomenon, there's Sprint, I think it was, advertised, Sprint PCS advertised that they had Pokemon experts at their stores, and they were going to put lures on the Pokestops near their stores if they could. Not all stores have, Pokestops near them, and come in for a free charge up.
Oh, interesting.
So that's become a big thing.
I don't know if I trust those. I have seen or heard of stories of, people charging their devices, at an airport or somewhere, and actually, that device is accessing whatever you're charging is accessing your phone. And so
I would have a little, I would be a little bit careful no matter what, but I would feel safer doing that at someplace like the phone store than at the airport, because at the airport, you never know who's gotten in there and played with it. And we talked about probably over a year ago about the hack that was found to actually get control through those cables.
Mm-hmm.
So it happens. Let's move on, though, to a super rugged phone that the journalist writing about it actually destroyed.
I can't believe this. This is now the phone is a Cat S60, and Cat is the Caterpillar company, that makes the really big, indestructible bulldozers, front end loaders, what have you. And so this is an Android phone that is supposed to be indestructible. Well, maybe not indestructible. It's supposed to be very heavy duty, designed for the construction industry.
Well, and the interesting thing too about these is it's a licensed Caterpillar phone. It's not actually manufactured by Caterpillar, so don't worry. It's but it's got weird things too, like thermal imaging. It's waterproof to 5 meters.
And designed to be dropped from 6 feet or 1.8 meters,
Yeah.
Shock resistant, water resistant.
But, so we actually talked about this phone when it was announced, just because, wow, wouldn't this be a cool phone for geocachers? It's nice and rugged. It actually, in the specs, is better than a lot of the GPSs we use, the GPSRs. So, yeah, you can get a phone that does it, but he actually broke this phone that's supposed to be more durable than our GPSRs.
Mm-hmm. Well, what happened is he didn't crack the screen. He didn't drop it. In fact, he took it in a pool with him. It's waterproof up to 5 meters. That's 16 and a half feet thereabout. That's really the deep end of the pool there, right? And,
yeah, if it even gets that deep.
Exactly. Well, on the back side of this, there's a tiny door that reveals the nano SIM, the micro SD card, when it's open. The thing is, it didn't take a whole lot of effort to open that door. So while the pool survived, 2 hours with me while the phone survived 2 hours with him in the pool, apparently that door popped open and dropped it into 6 inches of murky creek water. And that was all she wrote.
Oh, that's insane.
That's a real shame is what it is.
Yeah. Well, and the problem is you really do need to have access to those ports and everything from the exterior, from the slots. But it's like, how are you going to really weatherproof this stuff? And that's why we're seeing on a lot of these devices a move away from having the external slots so that you can do the weatherproofing. And even SIM stuff. There's the new soft SIMs that they're playing with on the tablets, and eventually they want to move that into the phones. So that's one less thing to become a problem. Another article from Engadget talks about a new feature in iOS 10. So this is for us iPhone and iPad users, that warns when your lightning port gets wet. So somehow in the software, they're able to detect when you have moisture in your lightning port and tell you that you can't charge because of that.
Interesting.
I assume there's some kind of sensor that's being used to do that, but I don't know. It could just be that they can tell from some kind of like resistance or whatnot.
Multiple contacts being hit that aren't normally connected.
Yeah, but it only works on the newer phones that they know of, the 6S. Plus and SE. So I think it is new sensors. So like my iPhone 6 won't work. Your son's iPhone 5 isn't going to work. But I like this feature, not so much because it's going to keep the phone from charging or frying itself, but I like the idea to tell you, hey, you know what? You got water in your phone on your phone that you might not even have known about.
Exactly. Well, and that means that you can no longer go into Apple and go, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
You'll have a sensor that says, oh, no, it's been wet.
We have one last story from Engadget that we're going to talk about this week that just came out. And this one is a U.S. government agency calls for the end of SMS authentication. And this is in that two-factor authentication that a lot of us have used. In 2 years ago, I think we had talked about the two-factor authentication from Google was one of the big ones doing this. So they're talking about they're going to stop allowing the two-factor authentication through SMS. In their case, they're looking at it being basically easy to spoof phone numbers, which it is.
It is. So, I mean, if you're going to go after somebody and you are, you know their phone number and you're trying to, there's not much that you can do if somebody's really coming after you.
Yeah. But the security dongles that work independently, those are a better solution. It's something that you have on you. The problem is if you lose your security dongle, if you lose your phone, you're always in trouble anyway.
Right.
But it is an issue that many people have brought up over years and years. However, because this is something coming from NIST, which I don't remember what it actually stands for, they're
National
saying
Institute of Standards and Technology.
There
Obviously.
we go. Thank you. They're calling for the end to it because of these potential security risks, and that probably means we're going to see a number of the other services that have been doing it killing it off. Now, I don't think you're necessarily going to see that from the likes of Google and Twitter, who have been doing the SMS second factor authentication. However, it's not unheard of. And one of the reports that I heard of was saying that really this is not two-factor authentication, it's two-step authentication. The difference being that it's going and checking and creating a second step, not like the keys, the security keys. Usually that's part of your password. Whether it's another field or it's tacked on to the end of your password, it's all happening at once. So by doing it as a separate step after you log in, it's actually two-step authentication, not two-factor authentication.
So, okay, I have switched mostly. Is this going to get me in trouble if I tell people what I'm using? To Google Authenticator. So if I ever lose my phone, I'm messed up.
Well, with Google's Authenticator, you also have the 10 one-time use keys that you can get from Google.
Right.
And I stored those in my 1Password, so I always have them. But that's not so secure anymore, or not so accessible anymore, because 1Password dropped the HTML version of the app. So,
interesting.
I'm not quite so happy with 1Password anymore, because that was one of the main reasons I used it. Is worst case scenario, I could log in from any computer anywhere, and they had this really cool HTML based app in my Dropbox. So as long as I could get into my Dropbox, I could get access to all of my passwords and everything.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you can do that from the web, which I was doing on my Chromebook.
If I'm logging into Facebook on the computer, and it sends me a text message on my phone, that truly is two-factor authentication. Yeah,
it's two-factor, but two-step, which is what they're...
Well, two-step, but you're using another device to verify who you are.
Correct. And, Authenticator is better because you don't have to go through another network. You have that Authenticator key that you just punch in immediately. And I get so frustrated dealing with the banks doing this, because I've had many, many times where it's like, oh, we have to log you in again. We'll send you this passcode. Okay, send me the passcode, please. Okay, I still haven't gotten it 5 minutes later. Where's my passcode? And now my session is expired. So, and then I'll get 7 all at once. Yeah, not necessarily a good implementation. This is one of the problems that isn't really talked about in those articles. But it's SMS gateways tend not to be as reliable as you might think.
And, another one would be fingerprint authentication that is on most new smartphones now.
Right. And that is true two-factor authentication as well.
But enter a password and use your fingerprint.
Correct.
Replace password with your fingerprint.
So something to think about. And we're going to wrap up this portion of the randomized show because we have a patron version coming in just a moment with that story. And thank you again to all of our patrons for your support. You are the guys that keep this running. You keep the lights on and the server spinning.
Thank you so much for all that. Now, Daryl, I tell people nearly every week what a great job you do scheduling our shows. Can you tell us what a few of the upcoming shows are?
I can. And I should probably mention that last week's show that got interrupted early, we do not have a new date scheduled yet, but it's going to be at the earliest mid-September. So just hang in there. We've gotten a few emails of feedback from that first show, which will probably include some of them next week, but we'll use all of those to color the debate whenever that show reoccurs.
Oh, we did such a good job talking about that after you went off the air.
And that's the thing.
It was a wonderful show.
Chris, if you weren't in Hawaii, we could have actually used it.
Oh, bummer.
Okay. But you didn't have your recorder or anything. Anyway.
No, I know.
So next week, we're talking about smartphone caching with a couple of our favorite guests, and that's Scott Burks and Shorty Knits. So make sure to tune in for that to get all kinds of tips and tricks for getting the most out of your smartphone while you're out caching. Then August 11th.
Invite Land Monkey to that show, smartphone caching. Sorry, go ahead.
August 11th, we're going to be talking about tech for event support, and that's going to be another great one where we're talking about all kinds of stuff. But if you're thinking about hosting an event with caches, especially event caches or caches that are going to be sticking around, if you're thinking about helping out during one of those events, make sure to check this out because we'll have some great tips for that one. Then for show 242, we're going to be talking with the Open Caching North America guys about blogging. Now we've got another really exciting show coming up. A really good hider from Maine, who's actually recommended by one of our listeners, is going to be on the show on the 25th, and that's R. Hendy. For anyone who might know that name, he's got some really, really good caches on in Maine.
Nice. He's a Maine cacher. But hey, if you want to hear more puns from me, be sure to check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes from this and all of our episodes. We absolutely love hearing from our listeners. So leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads at cachemaniacs.com or through the many channels of social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniac shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cachemaniac shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. The show's copyright 2016 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights are reserved.
Cash with the Cachemaniacs.